Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Planning and Assets Committee number 2025-01, the first for the year, being the 18th of February 2025. The meeting is now commenced at, I have 9:01. In attendance, we have the Deputy Chair of the meeting, Councillor Paul Tully. We have Councillor Marnie Doyle, Councillor David Martin and Councillor Jim Madden. I suspect in observing we also have Councillor Pye Augustine. Morning, Councillor Augustine. We do have some apologies this morning. Apologies from Mayor Harding, Councillors Deputy Mayor Jonik and Councillor Madsen. And they are attending other council business, and I'd like to move a leave of absence for those. That is seconded by Councillor Doyle. Any questions in relation to that before I put it to the vote? There being no questions, all those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Thank you. I now ask Councillor Martin if he could give us the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the land and waters we share. We pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging as the keepers of traditions, customs, cultures and stories of proud people.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Yes, CEO.
Sorry, just a minor correction. Is Councillor Madsen a member of this committee?
Oh, he may not be, no. He may not be, so that is an error on my behalf,
okay.
But yes.
We'll record it accurately, but thank you.
Yes.
Just a minor matter, thank you.
Thank you. The first item, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in the agenda this morning? There being no declarations of interest, we'll move on to business outstanding. We have item 1 on the report, which is a capital investment in provisional projects policy with proposed amendments. That matter was put on the table for today's meeting. However, due to Christmas and the absence of the Mayor on travel, we were unable to meet on that matter prior to the meeting. So if there is no objection, I would like to move that the matter be laid on the table to a future meeting. Seconded by Councillor Tully.
Chair.
Any questions in relation to that? There being no questions, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have item 2, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I take it they have been read and that they have been received as a true and accurate reflection of that meeting. Would someone like to move that those minutes are such? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin, thank you. Any questions, any corrections, alterations that are required? If not, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 3, officers' reports. The first item on the agenda is the Ipswich Heritage Plan 2025-2029, the Council's heritage assets. And I'll just ask the GM, Mr. Davey, if you'd like to speak to that report.
Yes, I might invite Nathan Rule, Manager of City Design, to come to the lectern, but whilst he's approaching, this is a study and the outcome of a study to guide our approach to heritage for the future. So Ipswich has a strong history of celebrating and protecting and identifying our heritage across various parts of council, beyond the obvious parts of planning decisions. And the idea of this report was to identify what we do now and what we can look at doing into the future to guide, the next 20 years of our program.
Before I ask Mr. Rill to speak, are there actually any questions from around the table in relation to the matter? I do have some, but Councillor Doyle, do you have some?
Yeah.
Well, I might just allow, this is quite a big document and quite a very important document. I might just ask Mr Bill to give another briefing
Sure.
on the matter, if that's all right, before we go to questions. Thank you. No, go ahead.
Good morning, councillors. So yeah, the Ipswich Heritage Plan. We're very proud of this piece of work. So this is a strategic plan to guide how council can address and maintain its own heritage assets for the next period of time. So we engaged a consultant, a heritage specialist, to help us to do that. It kind of follows the model of the Sunshine Coast Council, who is the only other council in the state to have one of these heritage plans. So given that we are a heritage city and a proud heritage past, it was prudent that council has one of these, and we're excited to take this to committee today. So essentially it outlines a range of actions and basically provides a direction for us to focus our efforts as the heritage team, which sits in the City Design branch. So we've got a good roadmap about where to focus our efforts on council's maintaining council's heritage assets.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, and thank you for the comprehensive work with council's been working on this for a few years now, and I'm delighted to see it in play. Can I just get you to confirm this particular piece of work and this report relates to council assets only?
That's correct. Yeah.
So conservation management plan of our existing assets, just for any residents watching today or that might come back to that. We've got very separate work or provisions within our new planning scheme that provides mechanisms for protecting local heritage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So this plan is only focused on council's own heritage assets. There was the thought of doing a kind of a part two once this was done to look at a citywide approach, but that's certainly a different scope and will involve community consultation as part of that exercise. And we look to have some further discussions in the future about that.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies. Reminder for everyone in the room, I guess. I have just a few questions. I noticed too that obviously from how the report reads, it looks like there's going to be some cross-departmental workings going on to achieve the strategy going forward, and it is a 4-year strategy, and I see it's clearly spaced out. So will that be the case?
Absolutely, yeah. So the idea is if we had a whole heap of team members, we could do it all in the first year, but we've got a limited resource base, so we're going to basically work to the priority one, the year one actions, and focus on those. And then as the years roll by, we'll just keep chipping away to the best we can to do those actions. And it will require all of council. So the plan has the lead part of council and the support parts of whichever department or branch has the lead. But the heritage team, which sits in City Design, will take the management of all of those actions to make sure that we're on track. And we've already started to work up a bit of an implementation plan for year one and what that might look like for the first year.
Very good. I also see that part of the strategy is to establish a dedicated heritage unit. And looking at the strategy, I believe that is a 2-year goal to achieve that unit. So do we actually have any staff that would automatically fit into that unit, or do we need to recruit new staff, or is it a combination of both?
I think a bit of column A and a column B. So we do have some heritage staff. It's a small team. Over time, I'd love to be able to grow the team, but to do more things. But at the moment, it is a small team.
So effectively, we have a unit, or we'll be rebadging that group of people as the dedicated heritage unit.
Yeah, I think one of the recommendation there from the consultant was giving the heritage team more focus within council. So whether that's a naming thing or something like that, we've got to look at how do we promote and execute heritage better internally. And so we're looking at some branding around what does that look like internally to give some focus to the heritage function.
The other question I have is that there doesn't appear to be a budget for this, and obviously it's too early to actually put a dollar figure on it, and it's something that I imagine that will be prepared for our forthcoming budget. But as I look at the strategies, there is potentially quite a few dollars that will need to be spent in this area in order for us to actually ensure that we have consolidated all our records, we have all of the strategies, and there are some, there's quite a few of them, there'd be 20-odd strategies all in here under 4 separate outcome areas. Some of them will come at a cost, but the other thing that I'm very pleased to see is that it looks like we're trying to develop strategies for or management plans for specific assets that we have as well, which is quite, which is good, particularly our heritage assets that we own, buildings and the like. Is that?
Yep.
Sorry, I know that was
budget.
a long-winded question.
Yeah. So in terms of budget, we have, so some of the items particularly, and we've just been looking at the year one because that's, we're about to head into the year one.
Yep.
So there is quite a few that can be done in-house that don't actually have a dollar value requirement to deliver them. Others will. And so we've already identified the first year items that do have a dollar spend, and we'll be putting that as part of the budget build for the coming financial year.
And my last question is that if we adopt this strategy or adopt the plan, is it something that will be reported on to council on a yearly basis as to how we're progressing through the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the plan would be to do that annually. So once a year, report back on the actions for that year, and then do that every year moving forward.
A bit of a traffic light sort of
Yeah.
system as
Yeah.
to how we're going?
Something like that, report card, or just sort of like are we on track? What do we need to do? What are the hold-ups? We'll do that as part of a yearly report.
Okay, very good. I have no further questions. Any further questions around the table? Thank you, Mr. Rule. Very comprehensive. Thank you. And it's a great
Welcome.
report. And please thank those who compiled the report, the external contractors and the like.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the matter? Oh, sorry. It is, the recommendation is, and I'll just confirm it again, that the report be received, the contents noted. That is moved by Councillor Doyle, who obviously has a love of heritage. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Madden. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair. I too would like to take the opportunity to thank staff, including Brett and Nathan and the teams for the work on this really important piece of work. We, as a local government, we need to lead by example if we expect our residents to identify, protect, conserve heritage assets. We certainly need to be setting the standard. So this provides a framework and the strategy going forward for doing that. Looking forward to that. I know historically we haven't had budget for this, and so I look forward to the budget discussions around how much money might be needed and obviously what resources we can apply to it, because it is important. It is really, really important, and without funding going forward, I do have concerns that the strategy may sit idle. The conservation management plans in relation to our individual assets, that's critically important as well. And I know we have done that work over the years, but sometimes we see those important plans sitting on the shelf without funding, and then too many years pass before we relook at them. So I'm delighted to see that we've got a framework in place to review and constantly monitor.
Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I too would like to concur with Councillor Doyle, and well done Brett and Nathan and team on the report. And I do think it's all too sad that community doesn't embrace our heritage. I think it's pretty underwhelming too. Of 77 local councils across the state, that Sunshine Coast is the only other council to have a heritage plan, particularly towns like Maryborough and Gympie that have a proud heritage. I'm kind of a bit underwhelmed they don't have something. So I think it's good that we are a leader. certainly concur and think that we should be doing everything we can to protect our heritage. And I'd love to see our council actually take action and say, for example, our woolen mills that we own actually start to practice what we preach and do something and activate that space. I'd love to see that moving forward. So thank you.
Any other discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'd like to acknowledge that we do have a number of members from the Heritage, is it Heritage Unit? What is the current name of the team that we have working in our heritage area?
Well, it's part of the city design team, and city design includes the past and the future. And so we have Tanya and Mark in the team, and Mark has recently been appointed as the city architect, so our first city architect, and that role is to balance, again, the past and the future.
Very good. So I'd like to recognise the work that unit or that team have done for many years. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Martin, but in many respects this report does bring together a lot of what the council has been doing, but it also ensures that if there's any shortcomings, it will strengthen that. So there are, over the years, there have been probably single issue works undertaken, like for instance our monuments and memorials. There was a long program of works that was done a number of years ago to restore them and bring them up to the beauty that they now present to the community. But the important thing about this document is that heritage is not just about those hard assets. And for some people, they're probably just thinking buildings. It could be something as simple as a historical marker. It could be our memorials, but it's also things like records and photos, and not only that, stories around our local community that we find a receptacle to officially contain those and keep those for future generations. So this is a very extensive report. I recommend it to anybody to read, and if they have any questions or they feel that there's something that's missing, by all means bring it to our attention. Did you wish to add something else, Councillor Doyle?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, off the back of your comments, I just, during my term on the Queensland Heritage Council and obviously attending the local government heritage conferences, our team here at Council, our heritage team, are so highly regarded.
Yes.
They're invited to participate in the panels, and they are absolutely looked upon as leaders in this field. So again, look forward to supporting them with this important work.
Yeah, I concur. And from the early 90s, when the original heritage study was undertaken, I think 91, 92, we were leaders in that field of listing local properties within our planning scheme. And this sees us as being leaders again. So thank you very much for that discussion. If there's no further discussion, put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Against, that's carried unanimous. Item 4, which is, again for you, Mr Davey, strengthening Ipswich Communities Plan. Is there any questions in relation to this report?
I have one question.
Councillor Tully.
It's just in relation to the recommendation, B, the last line, it talks about progressing and developing the process in collaboration with the relevant internal stakeholders. Does that reference to internal stakeholders include councillors?
Through the chair, I would suggest that's a natural consequence of preparing an implementation plan that comes from a resolution that's being sought from committee and therefore council. Happy to adjust if you feel it's necessary to include that step. If I may, the idea of this report will have, although the outcome of this report will have continued focus for various committees and council, because it moves into a phase of delivery potentially and looking at the scope of what we're committed to deliver into the future with community assets, and that as a natural consequence, some of that will have impacts on budgeting, for example, our capital program, the way that we actually utilise existing assets.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to accept your advice.
Did you feel it necessary to make an amendment? I had a similar notation, Councillor Tully.
No, I accept that advice, and I'm pleased that
Happy with the
reference to
recommendation.
internal stakeholders includes the elected members.
Really good. Any further questions? Anything you wish to speak to in relation to the report, Mr. Davey?
I might just give a brief overview and we can invite Nathan if there's any detailed questions. However, the background of this report is that for many years we've delivered community assets that you can see across the city, and we've had master planning in place, particularly in the space of the local government infrastructure plan, to collect money through infrastructure charges to then execute that and deliver the sites. What we don't have funding for is the operation of those or the actual construction of assets on land. And so when it came time to developing the new local government infrastructure plan, it was evident that we needed to review our model for delivery of community assets to see if that's the way that we should move into the future. And if I can be so blunt, the current framework for delivery of community facilities does have a focus of a lot of small assets all the way across the city. And inevitably that results in assets that are quite bespoke or single use on small land holdings, which are actually quite likely not the best spend of our investment. And the Strengthening Ipswich Communities plan, when it was being prepared and analysed, the data was looked at to go, well, what's the need across the various communities? What assets are already in place, be that council-controlled assets or other forms of assets? And then can we put that data together to go, what do we need in what location? What are the gaps in community services in those locations, and how are they going to be filled by other agencies or ourselves? And that has led to us looking at a more consolidated network of assets with a focus on what theme of community development may be required in a community, but ultimately larger, more usable mixed-use sites. So there's fewer sites across a city, but with more capability.
Any further questions? No questions to the report. The recommendations, there are two. One, that the plan be adopted, and the second one be that the recommendations of the plan be progressed through an implementation program to be developed by the City Design Branch in collaboration with relevant internal stakeholders, including the councillors, of course. So that is moved by Councillor Doyle, seconded Councillor Tully. Discussion? If there's no discussion, I'll just speak to it very briefly. I just want to commend the department on putting this together. Firstly, there's an old saying that says work smarter, not harder, but there's also another saying that as a council that we probably should try and do a lot with a little. And unfortunately, you know, as it currently stands, we could be spreading ourselves too thin, both budget-wise as well as resource-wise, by the old plan. And this is looking at consolidating a lot of that effort, and I commend the department for putting this together. Obviously, we're going to continue to struggle with the funding that we receive, as state and federals don't. They take the lion's share of money, and local governments have to fend for themselves. So we will continue to do a lot with a little, and we will attempt, as most councils do, to try and get the best outcomes that we can for our community with that little, by trying to provide as much as we can. And this report, this strategy goes a long way towards that. No further discussion. Yes, Councillor Martin.
I hope I haven't missed my chance, but pursuant to what Councillor Tully said earlier, I noticed Councillor Madden's got an agenda item coming up later, and just in terms of the wording of relevant internal stakeholders, well, who decides that? And I just think if it did say councillors and internal relevant stakeholders, there'd be no conjecture, there'd be no misunderstanding, things wouldn't fall through cracks. So I'd just like to see the potential we just cast our eye over things before things are action.
Yeah, appreciate that. And obviously Councillor Madson's not present today as an observer either. So, but that is part of his portfolio is sport and the like. So that is and other community facilities. So it is prudent that he be consulted. But but you can give assurances, Mr Davey, that councillors will be consulted as part of this plan, this strategy?
Yes, of course, because this is one piece of the infrastructure puzzle, and at the very least, we will be working through a series of priorities across the city, including community assets, and the delivery of these community assets ultimately becomes a budget decision. So yeah, I note as well that there's been a changeover in councillors since we commenced this report, and if it assists in understanding, happy to get the team to sit down with councillors and give an overview of, I suppose, the communities of need and the work that was done to identify what the future looks like. And as Councillor Antonelli alluded to, the big challenge comes financially and how we fund these assets amongst others. And so the implementation of this, I suppose, moves into looking at using what we've got better, and then what's the order of priority for delivering into the future, and balancing that with other community needs such as transport infrastructure or open space infrastructure.
Perhaps I could suggest that as part of a new briefing or the like be done for all councillors, maybe each 12 months, to let us know how we're going in relation to this, as well as a report to this committee on a 12-monthly basis on how we're tracking in relation to that. Satisfied with that, Councillor Martin? Councillor Madden?
Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words, Chair. Given what was just said, that this was a program that started with the previous council and that we've inherited it, might I suggest that this be included at the next CEO, at the next councillor briefing session, and then we can all, as a group, be brought up to speed with this plan.
Yeah, that was what I was alluding to, but not necessarily the next one. I was just leaving it open to when we do that. But you've made that suggestion to the CEO. We both have, so you're happy with that, CEO?
That's no problem, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, CEO.
The recommendation, as read before, remains. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimous. Item 5, which refers to the Asset and Infrastructure Services Department, the capital delivery for the month of December. Just note the absence and an apology from the department head, our new department head. I was hoping to introduce her to the broader community and this committee this morning, but unfortunately, due to a family matter, she is unable to attend. Our thoughts are with her. And I'd just like to advise that the CEO will be speaking and answering any questions, and if need be, the officers. So in relation to this recommendation, it's just a report, our monthly report on asset and infrastructure services for the, and this one's for the month of December. Is there any questions in relation to the report? Any highlights you wish to speak to, CEO?
Thank you, Chair. I can, as you've noted, it's the monthly report for the month of December last year. So notwithstanding that there was significant rainfall and several storms during the month of December, the progress from the team was still very solid, with the spend, as you've noted in the report, of 8.37 million against a budget of 8.47 million. So next month, of course, we'll be able to present to you January and how we fared during January. But as at December, yeah, a solid month. It notes the significant progress on the Springfield Strategic Road upgrades, progress on the Silver Jubilee Sports Field Clubhouse, and asphalt surfacing on the Redneck Plains Road upgrade, and pleasingly the finalisation of the Camerons Park upgrade. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
That is a very fine piece of work there at Cameron Park, and I know that my granddaughter specifically enjoys it, and she has given it her full vote of appreciation. Is there any discussion on the matter? Oh, sorry, I should put the recommendation. The recommendation is that it is received and noted, I believe. That Thank you, councillor Doyle again. Seconder, councillor Martin, thank you. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favour? Against, carried unanimous. Item 6 on the agenda, back to you, Mr Davey. Exercise of delegation report. Again, this is a receive and note report. Any questions? There being no questions, the recommendation, again, as I said, receive and note. Do I have a mover? Councillor Madden, and seconded Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? There being no discussion, put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Against, that's carried. Thank you. Item 7. Again, to you, Mr Davey. The Planning and Environment Court Action Status Report. Is there any questions in relation to this? Obviously, the meeting may need to go into closed session in relation to court matters. Are your questions so pointed, Councillor Tully?
Probably not, but we'll just see.
Okay.
There we go. Just got 2 queries on 2 of the matters. First one is in relation to Harburg nominees, 288 Brisbane Terrace, Goodna. That's been concluded, the judgment. But it talks about subject to conditions. Are there any variations or any conditions that were unexpected, or any issues that you consider should be brought to our attention?
Through the chair, not necessarily at this stage. So the procedural steps for these is if it ends up at that point of a judgment, the court don't set the conditions. The court then put it to the parties to set the conditions, and so there's an exchange that occurs usually over a month. This one has been protracted, as has the next one on the list, being cheap stays. So at some point in time, the parties will agree on a set of conditions, and then that will get a seal from the court.
So is that likely to happen shortly?
I would expect so. To be honest, I would have already expected it to happen. I think there's just been some protraction in the discussions between the parties. If I may be so bold as to say that protraction's not on our side.
All right, thank you. The second one is Division 3. Just a couple of simple answers, and I don't think we need to move into a closed session. Jackal Renewables, what's that application about? What's that matter about? And what's the minor change that was being sought?
If I address the context of the appeal, the development in its state as determined did warrant the levying of infrastructure charges, and what they call an infrastructure charges notice was issued for that. Now, the party that receives that notice has a chance to come back and negotiate that with the council within a period of time. Unclear on motivation, however, they chose in this instance to submit an appeal process to deal with issues that they perceived with the charge notice. So without going into the specifics of this one, in other cases, either the matter is agreed that the charge notice is validly issued and the appeal's withdrawn, or there is an issue with the charge notice, and that might be the way we've calculated it or something like that, and the charge notice might be reissued, including through a court process.
No, what I was specifically after was what was the original application for?
Oh, yes. So the original application in that instance was a use that involves the storage and recycling of factory seconds gyprock products. And so when they're rejected at the factory, essentially there is an option to use them. There's a high gypsum content in those boards, so they reuse them into a soil conditioning process. And this business receives those rejected boards to then convert them into a soil conditioner. And the change involved changes to the site layout and some of the conditions, honestly, in response to some compliance action to deal with some inconsistencies with the way the site had been laid out.
And the minor change approval, what was specifically was the minor change that they're now objecting to in terms of the dollars?
Yeah, so if we separate the dollars from the concept of minor change, so in any case, they would have been given a charge notice to pay levied infrastructure charges. The minor change itself is a change to the layout of the site. And for the Planning Act, there's two types of changes. There's a minor change and an other change. A minor change is one that doesn't necessarily change the substance of the site in a significant way and doesn't change the way that we go about assessing the application. Another change is a more significant change that potentially requires public notification and, you know, in the old language would actually trigger a new proposal. And so in this case, it wasn't a new proposal, it wasn't a significant material change of use or anything like that. It was a reallocation of areas on site.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Madden.
Chair, I realise that we don't want to go into closed session unless we absolutely have to. So in my questions to Brett, I'll keep it as narrow as possible. I'm talking about the proceedings in court listed for 19 Diamantina Boulevard. Now, I note that work's already commenced on that project. Just tell me if I'm correct here that something is happening where it's friendly between the parties, but it needs a determination by the court. Is that the case?
Correct. So through the chair, the appeal process, if there is a judgment issued by the court,
Yes.
the only entity that can change an approval is the court.
That's it.
And so this is actually, I think, the second round of such changes on this particular site. They have a valid approval.
Yeah.
They can go and execute that approval.
Yes.
But in order to make any changes, and that could be minor or major, it could be that access has to shift slightly, it could be the number of car parks change, it could be the building changes shape slightly. That requires the parties to get together and essentially agree on what's called a consent order. And that consent order is executed by the courts.
Good. I just wanted to confirm that was the case.
Any other questions? Mr. Davey, I just note that we have 5, according to the report, 5 matters that are still before. Is that currently right, before the Planning and Environment Court?
Yeah, correct. And with resolution of those couple of matters mentioned, so 19 Diamantina, the last item on the report, and the first 2 flood items, that'll obviously bring us to 3. We believe there's probably an amicable quick solution on the Jackal Renewables project, and so that leaves us with potentially one appeal. Touch wood.
Touch wood, of course. Certainly, for those in the gallery, those watching online, it should be noted that such small numbers of appeals and matters before a Planning and Environment Court for a city of this size is quite rare. I think it's a testament to the good work of our planning team and the negotiators within that team to ensure that we get the best outcomes. We look forward to next month's report. So the motion has been put, has it, or not? I can't remember now. It hasn't? No, okay. Sorry, we just went through questions. Sorry, So the motion is to receive and note. Is there any, yes, thank you, Councillor Doyle for moving, seconded Councillor Martin. Any discussion? There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Against, that's carried unanimous. And I believe that's the last item. We now move to my agenda. Any notices of motion? We do have a notice of motion, do we? And it's not a notice of motion, no. It is a matter for general business. We don't have any other matters arising per se, so we'll just move to general business. And I understand, Councillor Madden, you wish to bring up a matter of general business.
This concerns the signage that we have at the entrance to our suburbs. I call them suburb welcome signs. And I have a motion. I think it's appropriate for me to read the motion to begin with.
Yeah, go ahead.
That a report be prepared by council officers for the March Infrastructure Planning and Assets Committee meeting detailing 1, the options for consideration and approval by councillors for a standard welcome to suburb/town signs open brackets, colours, graphics, dimensions and layouts, close brackets. Number 2, details as to the council's plans to replace outdated brown welcome to suburb / town signs that have been in place for many years in the Ipswich suburbs / towns west of Carabin. And I'll move that motion, Chair.
It's seconded by, Councillor Martin, if I may.
Good. And I'll now speak to the motion.
I was just going to ask if there's any questions first. Oh, well, we'll speak to the motion. Well, before you speak to the motion, I'll just ask the CEO. I recognise the fact that we only introduced general business items to committees sometime last year. This is the first time we've had a motion presented. I'm just, through the CEO, just wanting to question whether the motion is in order in relation to our meeting procedures.
It wasn't, as I understand it, when it was introduced by council, by your resolution, intended to be a vehicle by which motions were introduced that weren't already on the agenda, or through notices of motion given in accordance with your meeting procedures policy, but with 5 days in advance. So possibly my advice would be for you to consider Councillor Madden's proposed notice of motion, Chair, but not resolve it today, but to consider it at the next opportunity.
Thank you, CEO. Thoughts around the table regarding that? Any views?
Is it not probably appropriate that it's notice of a proposed notice of motion today, and Councillor Madden will present that at the ordinary?
I think
don't know.
that
With
would be
everyone
more than
present?
That might
fine.
be a
Yep,
yeah.
that's okay.
We'll lodge it as a notice of motion for the
And he can still speak to it today.
Yes.
and
Yes.
I'd be yes. So that is recognised as a notice of motion for the ordinary meeting, and that's certainly in order with our meeting procedures and the like.
Correct, thank you. Yep.
Would you just, Councillor Madden, would you like to speak to the matter?
Yes, Chair, thanks for allowing me to speak to this notice of motion for the benefit of those people in the gallery here today and those people watching online. The background to my proposed motion is that in August 2024, I lodged a Snap Send Solve service request for a wall cracker, welcome to suburb sign that is located at the junction of Gregory Street and Sydney Street at Brassel. It was in a very poor state, Chair. Of the letters in wall cracker, the only letters that were visible were W and U. That's how bad the sign was.
So the suburb of Woo,
Yeah, the suburb of Woo.
right?
Even though I lodged the service request in August 2024, it ultimately wasn't replaced until this month, 2025. And when I inquired as to the reason for the delay, I was advised that the council officers had changed the ICC style guide for suburb and town names. But then when the sign was ultimately put in place, I was expecting that I would see the standard existing Ipswich City Council sign where the predominant colours are dark green, light green and white, with Ipswich City Council crest and also a sort of view, outline of a view from Denmark Hill. But what I got was a grey sign. The only colours were light grey, dark grey and black. And obviously myself and Councillor Martin were very disappointed about this. And that's when I found out that the style guide had been changed, and I was disappointed that it wasn't changed upon having consultation with councillors.
Yes, I don't recall any consultation on that matter.
No criticism, but it's just procedure. Obviously, you know, councils change over, and we were elected in March, and Councillor Martin was elected in October, so things change. So the reason, if you recall my motion is that the report by council officers will be the options for consideration and approval by councillors for a standard sign that would be in place right across Ipswich. The one thing to bear in mind is if we are going to switch to this grey sign, there's an awful lot of the old signs still out there that would need to be replaced, hundreds. Incredible cost. I should mention the significance of those colours, because for those people not born and raised in Ipswich, they may not be aware that the colours of Ipswich for our sporting teams are dark green and white.
Chair, if I may ask Councillor Madden a question. So have you received feedback around why the grey was chosen and there was a move away from the green? I'm just wondering if there's feedback around that, or something that the council officers will obviously answer in responding to your notice of motion. Just curious.
No, I didn't go back to the original council officers that I spoke with. I spoke with the CEO about this. I haven't received any feedback. To answer your question, I've received no feedback as to why a switch was made. So the other thing I'd just like to mention is that in my discussions with council officers, I was asked not to submit any more snap, send, solve requests to replace any signs in the western suburbs. Now, we're talking about west of Carabin. Now, the interesting thing about the Welcome to Suburbs signs west of Carabin, suburbs like Walloon, Thurgoona, Rosewood, Marburg, Tallagalla, Grantchester, the interesting thing about that area has signs that are completely different to the other signs in Ipswich. They have a brown background and white printing, and they have the altitude. The bad news is none of those signs have been replaced, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years. So they really
I would suggest they're that old, they haven't been replaced for
never
20
been
years
replaced.
or more.
Well, in my discussions with council officers, when I was asked not to submit any more snap, send, solves to replace those signs, I was advised that council was planning to replace all those signs, and I hope that in doing so, those signs won't be different to the rest of Ipswich. They will be the same as the other signs in Ipswich. Okay, that's the reasons for my motion, Chair.
Well, I just have another question. Have you received feedback about the existing sign from residents?
Are you talking about the sign that was replaced? Or
The now
grey?
fully spelt Woolkaraka sign, yes.
Well, I was asked why there was a change. The interesting thing about the location of that sign is about 100 metres away is a Brassel sign, which is the traditional sign style. I'll say dark green, light green, white. And about 2 kilometres away is the Carabin sign, which is the traditional sign. So people travelling out are wondering, why is the Woolkaraka sign so completely different to all the other signs in the area, save for those brown signs in the Western Corridor?
But
and people
outside
are
of that-
disappointed. And people have pointed out to me that, as pointed out to me by Councillor Tully, a change was made years ago by council for street signs to have, and when I say green, it's a particular shade of green. It's not light green, it's a dark green. And our street signs, like McGregor Street, the street I live in, is dark green and white. So this colour, we've already adopted these colours in other areas, and I'd like to see those colours continue. I really have no concerns about the traditional sign, but in saying that, I'm welcome to any suggestions about how that sign could be improved.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, Councillor Martin, you've got...
Yeah, pursuant to the CEO saying it will get held over, I'm a little concerned that those signs I find a little bit underwhelming, and I have had feedback from a couple of residents asking why, and also they were a bit underwhelmed at the signs. So my concern is if this gets held over, that potentially other signs, like the Brassel one Councillor Madden's got a photo of, is also in need of replacement, and some of the other signs that potentially going to roll these grey signs out. So whilst the thing is tabled, I'd just like to see that potentially no signs get changed until further discussion.
I've had some discussion with the CEO, and I believe you have too, Councillor Madden, and I just might ask the CEO to respond to that. She may be able to give some insight into that question or that particular matter of concern, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just limiting to the suburb signs, which was the initial feedback that was raised with me by Councillor Madden. I did get some advice late yesterday that we have done 2 signs to suburbs so far. I've got 5 in process, and this is, as Councillor Madden has already alluded and mentioned, it is due to defects. So there are defects in a number of the suburb signs. So, yeah, 2 so far with 5 in process and a number of others on our list. So I can operationally pause that while we provide advice on per the report on options for signage. Obviously, we'd like to resolve that as quickly as possible so that we can rectify the defective signs, but we'll work on that quickly and get that before you. And we'll have to decide, based on the level of defect, whether it's necessary to act sooner. And I'll let you know as committee members if we do have to proceed to replace, or whether we can just hold and pause on all of the signs. I imagine that it would be okay to pause on them, but I just wouldn't mind assessing the 5 that are in process and the numbers on the list to make sure that that's a prudent thing to do.
Councillor Tully, you had a question or wanted to raise a matter?
Just a comment in relation to Councillor Madden's proposed motion. Just a general discussion about changes in the style guide without any reference back to councillors. Ben Powell, he's the General Manager of Community, Cultural and Economic Development. I think that's the relevant department. In the past, councillors have been quite involved through briefing sessions about our signage, our city signage and our city boundary signage and our suburb signage. And I think that's really important because that's our feature to the community, to all of the visitors to Ipswich. I don't know why it would have been like what I might call a colourful sign would be replaced by a grey sign. Can I just say, and this is a general comment about decision making, and we operate on a very extensive process of delegations by council to the CEO, from the CEO to particular officers. But, the custom and practice that is built up in this council, which is a proper way to proceed, is that we as the directors of the organisation, the elected members, should be involved in that. I'm just a bit surprised that what I call a colourful sign which matches our city's colours have been replaced without any consultation with just a grey sign. And what Councillor Madden said was true about the older street signage. I'd be worried that suddenly we're going to change the street signs. When I came to Ipswich in 74, there was a combination of black on orange street signs, the street plates, black on orange.
Oh, yes, remember those.
And then
some of them
some
still
black
exist.
on white ones. Brisbane at the time, I think you'd gone to black on white, a whitish sort of colour, and in the CBD, white on blue. So I remember putting a proposal up to council after I was first elected that we go to white on green. And that was agreed to, and that's what we've produced. And when we amalgamated with the Moreton Shire in 1995, that process continued on, so that across the city we've got white on green, which are quite distinctive from the Brisbane-based signs. I'd be concerned that officers would or could just change the style guide and start changing the signs around the city. So I would hope that this is just an opportunity for us to have a say on what we think as the elected members of the council as to what we think is appropriate.
I agree with you, Councillor Tully. I think that whilst some people may be watching or observing that, this is just a simple matter of signs, but signs are, in many respects, a very important strategic positioning device for us as a city, and not just the image we want to portray for our city, but what type of lifestyle we have here. So we want to be a bright and vibrant city. And I must say that I was somewhat underwhelmed with what I saw of the image that was sent to me of the Wulkuraka sign in particular. Some of those signs you refer to, Councillor Madden, predate the most of the signs that we see. Some of them are quite old. They'd probably be well over 20 years old. So there is a need perhaps for us to look at this and be involved in, the strategic positioning of our city through these signage. So this is now a notice of motion formally put. And there's obviously now been some background given to that notice of motion that will be presented to the council ordinary meeting next week. So hopefully the matter can be dealt with quite quickly at that meeting. Yes.
Just one quick thing, Therese. Just on that top line, Councillor Madden proposed the following notice of motion.
It's not being put today.
It's not being put today.
No, this
It's
is
just
notice.
it's on notice
Thanks,
formally
Therese.
through this meeting.
Thank you.
I think it should be clear that it's a notice of motion for the next ordinary
next
council
ordinary.
For the
meeting,
next
not
ordinary
committee
council meeting, yes.
That's what we agreed at the beginning.
Rather than waiting a month. Yep. So next week, yeah. Sorry, wasn't that clear, Councillor Madden? I don't believe
Talk
we.
about colours all over again.
Yes, yes. Can I? We don't need to actually move or anything in relation to this or vote in this. It's just now a formal notice of motion.
Sorry, Chair, can I just, Teresa, just pause? I think, isn't that right, that it's a report, that, no. So we're not, isn't that the notice of motion is to be considered at the March Ordinary Council meeting?
It should be February. Is it? Is it March?
And the notice of motion will be that a report is prepared for the March committee. So it was, as I understand it, we're just moving this notice of motion to be considered at the council meeting next week, so the February
the follow-
council meeting. But the motion itself will be that a report is prepared by council officers for the March infrastructure and, planning and assets committee, yeah.
Okay, just some technical changes to the wording. I'll just wait until you satisfied with the changes there, Councillor Madden? Very. Sorry?
Should that first line, sorry, thank you, Chair, Chair, CEO, should that first line read, Councillor Madden propose that the following notice of motion be considered or will be tabled at the next?
Yeah, to be tabled. Or presented, what's the correct wording?
Yeah.
Yeah. There may obviously be some reconsideration of the wording between now and then or amendments at the meeting, but that is the formal,
Yeah, it's
it's a notice
just
of motion.
giving notice
Yeah, it's
of
giving-
a notice of motion, which we have historically done at the end of a committee or ordinary meeting. When you haven't quite finalised your notice of motion, you give everyone notice that it's coming.
And could I suggest that the mover and seconder be removed because it's not a motion?
Yes,
being
there's
moved
no
today?
need for any. Okay, so everyone around the table satisfied, and particularly the proponent of the notice of motion, happy with the wording? Okay. Well, that's formally put, that motion, notice of motion. Is there any other general business? It's not? Oh, yeah, I mean, perhaps not the right choice of wording, but it's formally then put on notice, I guess. And that's what I actually meant. Yes,
Just with
Councillor
regard
Martin.
to the suspension of signs, did we need to say anything about that, Sonia, or is that just a?
I think we have that
through the
by
chair?
agreement.
That's okay?
Yeah, of the CEO. Satisfied with that. Is there any other general business around the table? I just want to, there's been a bit of conjecture surrounding the operating hours for the Bradfield Bridge. I just put it out there that I'm probably going to bring that up. It does cross over a number of different committees, but I think it's probably prudent that it be discussed in the Economic Development Committee. So I'll just make mention of that now. So if there's any officers that might need to be in attendance for that to assist Mr Davey for that meeting. Thank you. Is there any other general business? There being none,
With your indulgence, that the Finance and Governance Committee commence at 10:20 a.m.
yes, that's a procedural motion, is it not? Or just a note?
But it needs a seconder.
I need a seconder. As a seconder for that, yes, Councillor Madden, thank you. All those in favour? Against, that's carried unanimous. Next meeting will commence at 10:20. Time now is 10:01. I thank you for your attendance.